Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Longevity Lounge. Today's guest is Dr. Jon Schoeff, who is a surgeon, a longevity expert and fitness enthusiast. And today we talk about all things longevity, but mostly the importance of muscle health, strength and size. And he talks about his routine, his approach to health and longevity, and he shares with us the secrets of living longer and living better. Let's jump into this episode. You guys are going to love it. Such a pleasure to be with you and just to have you on the show.
Likewise. Happy to be here. Happy it worked out.
Yeah, happy it worked out. Well, we're super excited. You've obviously got a huge platform where you share a lot of your insights. But I think something that's really interesting is you also have some experience serving in the Navy before you really dove into what you're doing right now, which I think is really fascinating. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, my Navy experience, to put it very bluntly, I've said this before, but I wasn't patriotic. I didn't join the military because I was like, rah, rah, wanted to do something. It was pretty pure and simple. I worked 3 jobs to pay for college, and I didn't want to take on any more debt to go to med school. So there was an opportunity, you sign up, get med school paid for 100%, and then you owe years of service. So it's like, that's a pretty good deal. I commissioned in 2000, so a year before 9/11, before the world changed. And at that point in time, we hadn't been to war or anything like that. And so I thought this is a good deal. I'm going to basically get paid, go to school, no debt, all these kinds of things. Obviously 9/11 happened, and that changed my world altogether. It actually redirected my course of training from originally being on a track to do plastics and aesthetic surgery into general and trauma and vascular. So it really rerouted that for the better. Everything works for a purpose, I believe. But yeah, so I joined thinking I had a really slick deal happening. And, fast forward, I spent 5 years of my, the starting point of my surgical career on active duty. I did 2 extended deployments to Afghanistan. So combat trauma surgery is a very unique experience when you really see it up close and personal. It was transformative, personally, professionally. Profoundly impacted my view of life. Some for the better, some for the worse, right? Yeah. But my appreciation for service members, for what the men and women that serve our country, what they go through, is the most humbling experience of my life.
Yeah, that I can't even imagine. I not too long ago I read David Goggins' book Can't Hurt Me, and his Navy SEAL experience, and I think anyone who had any kind of excitement about the idea of serving in the Navy, because that's like a cool thing. I think when I read that, I was like, yeah, no way. That like extremely intense circumstances, and like you said, working with so many dangerous, situations and cases. How do you talked a bit about how it shaped your perspective on life and health. How did it inform what you're doing now in your current career?
My career has taken almost a lot of twists and turns in my career. And I kind of found myself not reinventing, but reorienting my approach to medicine. I'm a surgeon by trade. So that's my training background prepared me to do all these advanced surgeries, but definitely did not prepare me well to deal with illness. And then you look around and see just the chronic conditions that exist, especially in the United States, but really Western civilization. And I think my time in the military, above all else, it was incredibly humbling, and it was incredibly centering to realize, to really comprehend that life is very short. It's extremely short. What those men and women do for our country is true service. I'm going to wax philosophical briefly, but what the politicians in our country do is not service at all, right? But those service members, they're out there on the front line. They're willing to give their life. So it changes a lot about how you view and think about your fellow man, I think.
Yeah.
I think it helped me appreciate the profound resilience of the human spirit and the even more profound fragility of the human body, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing what people overcome and amazing how little can end a life. So there's that piece of it. But I really think what drove me down this path of longevity medicine was really threefold for me. One, I've been a surgeon now for 20 years, and in America, so I do spine surgery. That's my
Hmm.
day job, and the rates of obesity, what we call comorbidities, so additional illnesses, everything that goes into sort of the human condition today.
Mm.
When you look at it on a surface level, and I did this for many years in my practice, you don't really think about it, right? You got high blood pressure, here's a pill. You got glucose issues, here's a pill. And I have literally gone back, retraced my steps all the way back to week one of medical school. Probably where I've spent the last 3 years is just deeply invested in the biochemistry, the basic human pathways, all these things that say one thing and one thing only, which is there is a root cause for the vast majority of non-genetic related illness in the United States today.
Mm.
And it didn't just happen to people, it didn't plop down from the sky, right?
Yeah.
It's nuanced. There are a lot of layers to it, but at the end of the day, metabolic disease and dysfunction is really the progenitor for 99.9% of the ailments in the US. So
Mm.
doing surgery, it's cool. You go in there with a knife, you rearrange things. And it hit me after a couple years when I was in practice of these people are not doing well, right?
Mm.
You high five each other and you get these perfect x-rays of the spine, but then a year later, the person's still in pain. They're still debilitated. Yeah, it becomes less satisfying, right?
Mm.
And so I began to look kind of more critically at what I was doing. I went into medicine to help people. I'm like, am I really helping people? It's cool, but am I actually helping anybody?
Mm.
And so that was sort of the first big aha moment or step in my own career progression to say, wait a second, like we've got to get deeper here. Because I tell people this, I tell my patients this all the time, like this surgery is going to be a couple hours of my life,
Mm.
right? In
Yeah.
and out. It's the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
not only do we have to get it right, but we have to position you in a way that gives you a reasonable chance of success. Or
Mm.
otherwise, we're going to be back here in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So we started a prehab, what we called a prehabilitation program in my practice, focused on, guess what? Hormone health and optimization, which also kind of leads into bone health, which is a big piece in the spine work. Muscular strengthening, addressing non-use atrophy.
Mm.
Central obesity is a major player in risk stratification, and then obviously complications risk in surgery. So shrinking the waistline was a big piece of it, and improving overall connective tissue wound healing. Those really four key elements were the driver behind our prehab program.
Mm.
And lo and behold, when someone really is on board and puts in the work, guess what? They do a lot better after their
Yeah.
surgery. So fast forward, and I think really there were two key moments in my life, one personal, one professional. COVID hit, and that was probably the biggest turning point in my practice where one, surgery slowed down a little bit.
Mm.
And so I had more time to process and think and invest myself more, I think, in the longevity side. But it also makes you think, when a pandemic occurs, makes you kind of pause and think about your own mortality. And like, I've always been a health nut, but
Yeah.
am I really on the right track? Like, am I doing what I need to be doing? And for me, I'm a nerd. I geek out. Longevity medicine has been kind of like a reinvigoration of my entire pursuit of science and medicine,
Mm.
because it's like this stuff. By the way, think about it this way: you know, in medical school, quite literally, probably the first week of medical school. You talk about all the metabolic pathways, cellular metabolism, biochemistry. You cover that in probably a week's time. I've
Mm.
spent the last 5 years unpacking 1 week, and it's
Yeah.
been like the coolest experience. And it's just like, I just geek out over it. Like, how do
Yeah.
we take all this information, this data? How do we use common sense? How do we apply it to our lives? And how do we transform ourselves and others in a meaningful way? So that was, and
Yeah.
then the other piece of COVID was, after COVID, we had the whole GLP thing. And there's no denying, you can like or hate the GLPs, but I think it did one thing for modern medicine, which it opened a lot of doors, good, bad, or
Mm.
otherwise, to the general public seeking out care.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you see, I mean, I think that's evolved into, now you see the efforts in the peptide space on social media, right? It's just
Yeah.
exploded. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's right or wrong, but there was a big driver. And so what was once just a surgical practice, we felt kind of forced into breaking off. That's when we
Mm-hmm.
opened the longevity lab, which is our longevity medicine practice,
Mm-hmm.
to account for all the non-surgical patients that were knocking on the door.
Right.
That makes sense?
It does. Wow. There's
I
so
know
much.
that's I know that's a lot to follow. But the last piece of the puzzle, like I said, there's three things. The last piece of the puzzle came through personal loss. And my wife and I, our first daughter, we lost at birth.
Uh,
And this was 2019, so right before COVID. And for me and for her, we've always been active and fit and reasonably healthy, right? You could get away
yeah.
with some bad habits. And it just, that life experience just put me into a tailspin.
Yeah.
And I woke up, say 2 years later, say in a fog. I'd gained like 50 pounds. I
Yeah.
was just absurdly unhealthy. But here's what was so interesting to me, and this was the main driver. This is the final piece of the puzzle for the longevity lab. Is, I'm a physician. In theory, I should have physician buddies that I call up and I'm like, hey, what should I do about this? Right. Everybody
Yeah.
thinks like doctors have some inside track. And the thing was, I got so unhealthy. I didn't know what labs to check. I didn't know what to do to get back on track. And I'm calling buddies, I'm calling people, and it was a painful process that I never really arrived at feeling like, oh, I've got my team together. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's me as a physician with knowledge of the human body. So,
Yeah.
putting myself in other people's shoes, I'm like, well, if it's that much of a struggle for me, what is it for everybody else? So
Yeah.
that really drove this pursuit.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, so much there that has driven you to this point. I think you articulated it really well. And I think in the practice of, obviously you're doing surgeries on spines, on people's backs. That's obviously, I'm sure, seeing that firsthand makes you very aware of your own back and your own spine and your own postural health, whatever. We had a guest on not too long ago. It was, if you're familiar, Dr. Mike Israetel, and obviously a huge, fitness fan. I mean, he's an exercise enthusiast, exercise scientist. And I think something that he shared once that kind of changed my perspective on, I guess, back health and hypertrophy was, he was like, a lot of people have a lot of fear with lifting weight in the gym, especially as they get a little bit older and what that might do to their back or, whatever. But he was like, but if you can deadlift a decent amount of weight, maybe your own body weight, or squat that body weight or whatever, it's like the likelihood of you pulling your back out just one day randomly when you're not really doing anything is probably going to be a lot lower. And I think this is something that you really advocate for on social media, is you really talk about muscle health and strength. And what is something that most people, you think, don't fully understand when it comes to muscle growth and their longevity?
Well, I mean, at the core of longevity is muscle health.
Mm.
Muscle is the organ of longevity. There is the direct relationship between, I mean, we know the data, more muscle and stronger muscle equals longer life, but longer, better life. So at a basic level, functionally, more muscle means you can move. You can recover from illness. I did a talk not too long ago and listed off 11 different body systems that are positively affected by muscle, right?
Mm.
Brain,
Yeah.
immune, heart, blood vessels. The list is so lengthy that truly muscle does actually form the basis or foundation of long-term health, right?
Mm.
Um, so the intriguing thing though is, and people will get on board with that. They'll be like, oh, you can, it kind of makes sense. I don't think people understand the depth to which things like the direct relationship between muscle contraction and mood, right? They're very clear pathways. Things like things termed myokines, BDNF. People are injecting BDNF. Guess what happens when you contract your muscle? You boost your BDNF. I mean, it's that simple. It's direct relationships. I think people still struggle with comprehending what it takes to build and maintain muscle.
Mm.
So it's one thing to tell somebody, and this is one thing that I take so serious in my practice. If you've heard me talk, I mean, I will never ask you to do something I don't do myself. I am the living proof. You want to know why it works? What do you want me to do? You want me to take off my shirt? You want me to do push-ups? Do you want me to, if I can't outperform my own clients, I wouldn't, as a client, come to me. The idea of, it's a very antiquated concept in physician world. And I think that's why we've lost a lot of trust with people, is because you've got doctors that clearly don't practice what they preach.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you have more savvy consumers, healthcare consumerism is a real thing, they don't have to come see you. And when I walk into an office, I see an obese doctor who's telling me about diet and nutrition. It's like, I'm going to pass, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other, by the way, this is an aside, but the longevity lab for me has been like a massive level up, because it's challenged me. Like, hey, how serious are you about living this day in, day out? You don't get, I take it as a positive, right? I don't get to get, that's the way I look at it. I don't get to go off the rails and go crazy on a diet and live a really unhealthy life for a few months, kind of just disappear off the globe, right? And I hold myself to that standard. And I think that's where I connect most with people, because whether or not you go along with everything I tell you to do, I'm going to give you the evidence. I'm going to show you the science. I'm going to make sense out of it. But above all else, I'm going to live it.
Mm.
So that goes a step further when you talk about muscle health, because it's one thing to tell someone, you hear this from like a Tia, guys like a Tia, they're regurgitating information. Oh, carry your body weight in a farmer carrier for 1 minute, right?
Yeah.
Increase survivability. 2-minute dead hang. Well, that's great, but can you do a 2-minute dead hang? Because all of a sudden that changes the dynamic. All of a sudden you actually know what it physically takes to do what you're telling someone else to do.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest gap that still exists when we talk about muscle health. I think we've gotten to the point where people are, the narrative is there.
Yeah.
But there's still a big gap. Women especially, right? They don't want to get bulky. So that's what I always get. Well, doc, I mean, that's great, but I like my Pilates because I don't want to get bulky. Like, this isn't about getting bulky. My mom is over 70 years old, and she's deadlifting, just like you said.
Yeah.
Posterior chain, paraspinal support, that's her survivability. Reduces the likelihood of osteoporosis, long bone fracture. The list is so lengthy. So I think the message is out there. Muscle matters.
Mm-hmm.
The gap still exists of, okay, what does it actually take? What does it mean to go out and build healthy, lean muscle? Because that's a whole nother animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that resonate?
It does. It does. And I think you definitely hit that really well. I do think that, especially in the female community where it's like, yeah, Pilates is so popular, yoga, hot yoga. There's like so many things. I even see like the bungee cord exercises. There's such a variety where it's like, wow,
I see these posts
like,
that are like, yet another way to avoid building muscle, and they're like doing these dances on spring shoes and stuff. It's like, but I mean, it's pretty pervasive. The cardio and restrictive dieting is still, I hear this. I'm fortunate to be in an area in Denver and have a practice it's very boutique. It caters to a very select group of individuals. I connect best with high performers, people that are like have an edge and want to keep that edge, or they see that edge slipping. I feel like I can kind of lean into that a little better, you know? But it's so fascinating to me that I have incredibly sophisticated clients, high performers, former athletes, and yet there's still a knowledge gap between what to do and what not to do. In the standard answer, I'd say almost uniformly, 90+%, if you say like, okay, you're trying to get lean, you're trying to control that waistline. Cardio, calorie restriction.
Yeah.
That's it. Cardio, calorie restriction. In fact, it's totally the opposite. And I learned this, not the hard way, but through my own personal journey of recentering, getting away from a restrictive mindset and saying, I'm going to take a mindset where I'm fueling with a purpose to build muscle at all costs. And I'm either building muscle or maintaining. It's only one of those two options. But with a muscle-centric focus, it has to be adjusted or accounted for in your nutritional plan. It has to be a strategic approach to how you train, right? Everything has to align, but still and we're hearing more about progressive overload, pre-failure, you know, these kinds of things. It's getting more mainstream, which is great. But I still think the gap between telling someone to train to pre-failure and having them train to pre-failure is massive. Yeah. It's a massive gap. There are very few people that really, like a David Goggins, like really embrace the suck, right? You know, to grow requires discomfort. Yeah. Pretty simple, right?
Yeah. It's so true. It's funny. As you were saying that, I was just thinking about like this funny, I kind of have this in some of my friends where, you know, and I was a personal trainer for a couple of years and it was very brief, but even just throughout that experience, you know, I'd have clients who would say, I don't know how I'm not losing weight because I'm having these like healthy protein bars and these, you know, whatever. It's like, you could have healthy brownies or healthy whatever. It's like, if you're still eating a ton of them, you're still going to be having a lot of calories. And it's such a funny, like this kind of, I don't know, this space online where it's like healthy this, healthy that, where it's like, people are really excited about it, but they're just still, I just feel like they're not getting where they want without doing this kind of hypertrophy training of building muscle the way they need to be. And it's totally misleading.
Agreed. And but I think that the other thing I would say about muscle health is muscle truly is the great equalizer. So I'm going to say this a little bit tongue in cheek, but if you're going to maintain a couple bad habits, build more muscle. If you want to erase that Thanksgiving dinner, build more muscle. If you simply having more lean muscle mass is transformative in and of itself, right? So I hate the term weight loss. I despise it because everybody's like, oh, it's just semantics. No, I think what it does is it actually frames your mindset around what you're trying to accomplish. And that number on a piece of plastic on your bathroom floor is meaningless. It only has a minimal value in context to what whole body health looks like, right? Body composition that's the definition of health, right? No one is out there wanting deliberately, well, I don't think, no one's out there wanting to lose muscle and preserve fat. I haven't met that person yet, right? But what did they come in and say? I want to lose weight. And I say to them, no, you don't. You want to lose fat. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that fat mass and convert it into a fuel source for muscle growth. That's a win. That's body recompositioning. It's not weight loss. Because quite truthfully, if a client of mine loses 5-10 pounds, I mean, if they've built muscle and lost significant fat mass, that's great. But heaven forbid their fat mass is stable and they've lost muscle mass, I'm failing at my job. So once again, scale weight is meaningless. In fact, when I meet with a client first day one, we educate and say, listen, these are the only metrics we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about absolute body fat mass. We're going to talk about skeletal muscle mass and skeletal muscle mass indices. And then we're going to talk about visceral fat. That's it. All the other stuff is either math or a poor surrogate. The problem, though, in America still, I mean, look on social media. Everything is weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, energy balance, which is true. Like, here's the thing. I'm not knocking what you're saying, because fundamentally, energy balance equates to weight management. That's a true statement, unequivocal. I eat excess calories, I will gain weight. That's just simple. That's simple biology. But the answer's out there, and the question's been asked 1,000 different ways and been answered very well, which is, okay, let's get deeper into this conversation, talk about healthy body composition, because eating excess calories in the form of protein does lead to weight gain, but it preferentially leads to increase in lean muscle. It's been done. The studies have been done, right? They're out there. It's very clear that overeating protein is a radically different process than overeating carbohydrates or fat, right? And then fat is another nuanced conversation. It's not that simple. But yes, calories in, calories out, but I think that oversimplifies. And what I work with clients to do is, my approach, if we calorie restrict, it's extremely minimal. Where we get an optimal energy balance from is increased performance. How do, like, first of all, restricted dieting, I'm not going to argue this with anybody. It sucks. Yeah. Anybody that's done it, you're talking, these guys telling me, I had a client come in who was literally, based on his size, and then when we did his RMR, his resting metabolic rate, his resting metabolic was like 2,800, and then you add on activity factors. He was doing a 1,500 calorie a day diet. Like, that's gonna, I mean, you may do that for a couple weeks, but you will fail miserably. That's a setup. Instead, I actually want to maintain you at a eucaloric, pretty stable eucaloric, increase the demand, increase performance with fuel on board to drive muscle health. Muscle is going to consume more fat as calories. Not only does it work better, but it's the only mechanism to actual true healthy body recomposition in a healthy and sustainable way. The crash and burn, I mean, sure, can you do it? Yeah. Is it sustainable? I can tell you, point in fact, from my perspective, it's not. And so you get these camps that, you know, social media drives these bizarre juxtapositions, and they're very black and white narratives, right? This or that, right? It's not that clean. And I think we really need to reframe the conversation around muscle first, healthy body composition, not scale weight. Scale weight's out. And longevity as it relates to those critical metrics. Because we have great longitudinal data in that regard as well.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about this on social media as well, but you've touched on it there, that there's this aspect of metabolic health when it comes to fat loss. It's not just the weight. It's not just, you know, whatever, which I think is actually, for some people who maybe aren't very fit or, you know, passionate about health or fitness, that's kind of a difficult subject for them to understand, because even the idea of doing, I don't know, and I'd love to hear your take on this, on something like a refeed day, or intentionally, strategically giving them calories or macronutrients. It's, you know, I worked with a client not too long ago who hardly ate anything most of his career. He was so busy. And he's like, I don't get it. I mean, objectively and statistically, he was overweight, but he hardly ate anything in his day. He walked me through his diet. I'm like, wow, you're not eating anything. He's like, what's going on? And I'm like, well, your metabolism is probably wrecked. You don't sleep well. Your testosterone is probably low. I mean, there's so many things, and I just don't think it's talked about that much. But you talk about it a lot on social. Do you mind explaining to the audience, you know, how the metabolic health aspect plays a role and how they might be able to improve that?
Yeah. So I think let's define metabolic health, and I think we have to couch the term around the concept of metabolic flexibility. Now, I'll tell you this: metabolic flexibility, in the simplest terms, is optimal and rapid conversion of fuel use based on conditions. If I'm running from a bear or running from a dinosaur, I need jet fuel. Okay. Now, Americans have jet fuel for centuries on board, right? So we've convinced ourselves. But the ability for your cells, this is a cellular level phenomenon, to rapidly convert from fat for fuel and carbohydrates for fuel, flip back and forth, that is metabolic flexibility. And the best human example of metabolic flexibility is insulin sensitivity. Think of them as synonymous, okay? So when we have optimized metabolic health, our cells are highly sensitive to insulin. Now, insulin is a key piece of the puzzle. It gets a bad rap. You hear insulin resistance, and I think a lot of people think insulin is the problem. No, glucose is the problem. Insulin's doing its job. Insulin gets burned out just like anybody else would, but glucose is the problem. And where's the glucose coming from? Like, again, it's not coming from calories, man. Let's get real. It's not coming from calories. It's coming from the garbage, highly processed sugars in your diet. People cannot wrap their daggone heads around the difference between added sugar and excess sugar and carbohydrates. They're not anything of the same, right? Radically different. They behave different. So then you get into these camps of, oh, well, you're trying to demonize carbohydrates. No, but what on earth does my healthy salad dressing need sugar in it for? There's not a single scientific study validating the positive health benefits of sugar, simple sugars, mono or disaccharide sugars. There's no health benefit whatsoever. Now, so people get a little bit off the rails and then they start talking about carbs. Well, carbs are non-essential. Well, technically, yes, but that's a different conversation. But let's be real. Added excess sugar is the root cause of insulin resistance, diabetes, and death in the United States today. Okay? I mean, you want to talk hardcore numbers. Here's the deal. That's just to put it in perspective, right? Consider that diabetes, type 2 diabetes, by the way, really important, we'll call it end stage or terminal insulin resistance. Is that fair? You see what I'm saying? So like insulin resistance precedes or predates diabetes in individuals by 30 to 40 years. Okay, so it's a progressive state. We have excellent longitudinal data and mortality data related to how the top 4 causes of non-traumatic causes of death in the United States today are impacted in a diabetic, right? 3 to 4x increase in heart attack, stroke, dementia, cancer, about 2.5, 3x. So it's very clear if you're doing something that is pushing you towards the path of diabetes, granted, what's the difference between a full-blown diabetic and a highly insulin resistant? I don't know, okay? That to me is fighting for scraps. But metabolic disease as a progression of insulin resistance is the leading cause of death in the United States today. Unequivocal. Unequivocal. There's no other single agent that has that profound of an effect across multiple disease conditions. Does that make sense? Okay. Elevated, elevated cholesterol, so on and so forth. Well, we know the link to heart disease, right? We know the link to stroke, but no single factor crosses all these different variables, okay? So going back to if we take it from that perspective, metabolic health or metabolic flexibility is the normal human condition that our lifestyles have fully eradicated. We are, as a society, are highly glucose dependent. Our bodies crave and prefer glucose for, you go everything from, brain dependency down. And glucose, by the way, is much easier for the body to metabolize. It's just glucose in excess becomes toxic, right? So I think if the uniform pursuit across global healthcare was to reverse insulin resistance by all means, by definition, you would have a substantial reduction in all-cause mortality, comorbidities, all these numbers. Instead of chasing all these surface level phenomena, do I chase them? Yes, I have to. Do I have to stabilize someone who has triglycerides in the 300? Yes, but the origin of those triglycerides, I'm also addressing that as well. So I look at, people ask me this all the time. Well, statins is a great one. Do you use statins? Well, yeah, I use them for what they're good for, which is converting soft plaque or high-risk plaque to stable or hard plaque, right? And managing lipid levels. But my expectation when I'm starting someone on that is we're going to get the root cause fixed. And I don't anticipate you needing to be on this long term. That's the difference between just slapping band-aids and walking away versus saying, hey, I get it. We got to stem the tide here. Okay. You got a lot of fires burning, but we're also going to get at the gas leak, the mainline leak that's continuing to fuel everything. Now, bear in mind, the simplest, by the way, here's the thing. The simplest, the number one thing you can do clearly, linear relationship to improving insulin sensitivity is building lean muscle. Muscle equals insulin sensitivity by definition. Do you understand why?
Yeah.
I mean, for every myocyte, every muscle cell, you have a massive load of insulin receptors, GLUT4 channels. You increase storage capacity for glucose, right? You can actually control glucose load better pound for pound. Lean muscle is always the answer. So that's why, again, it all kind of comes full circle to make sense.
That's amazing. I mean, you said so much there that I think is so valuable. And I think this is why your platforms are so important for so many people, is there is so much information. Everyone's like, we've got so much that everything's being criticized so much that everyone's like, do we even know what's going on? And it's like
ping pong. Yeah, and that's why my other critique of the folks out there, I know you're running a podcast, but the people that are practicing medicine behind a microphone, which is this whole new evolution that didn't exist when I was in training, right? Medicine is a personal face-to-face thing. Now it's all remote. Now it's behind a microphone, right? Oh, I'm treating 1 million people because I told someone to do something from a microphone. No, you're not. That's the difference, is I'm in the trenches. Not only am I never going to ask you to do something I don't do myself, but I'm going to sit across from you and you're going to hold me accountable for the crummy advice I gave you last week. That's the deal. That's what we sign up for. So it increases, whether it's subtle or not, it increases the level of accountability that I bear. So I have to know my stuff inside and out. And I have to, there's so much noise. I have to filter the noise. And that's really what I try to do for clients, is like a lot of sophisticated people, what I call seekers. They're out there. The Atias, I read Huberman's book, I read David Sinclair. They just rattle off these people. And they're like, but Doc, they kind of like, one guy says this and one guy says this. And you're like, yeah, exactly. We need to kind of, now there's valuable information out there, but my job is to take all of that in totality, consume it, digest it. And here's the key: apply it. Because I said something recently on social media, the issue with the truth bombs that guys drop, now everybody's like a scientist, right? The data says, the data is nuanced, okay? And if you include scientific textbooks, roughly 90% of evidence-based medicine, right? Evidence-based medicine is not reproducible. That's a problem. The gold standard, the best studies we have are called randomized controlled trials, right? RCTs. 33% of RCTs are not reproducible. 1/3 of your gold standard, you can't do twice. Problem? I think so. Now, that doesn't make the science bad, but that is the nuanced part that you can't in 30 seconds, like trying to do a 3-second hook and draw someone in and bright shiny object, dopamine hit. You can't do that I'm desperately trying. I'm doing my best to condense it down to like, okay, what are the things that are going to move the needle that are meaningful, and where is the opportunities? That's why I said, if you're building muscle, whatever you're doing, if it centers around building muscle, you're winning. That is the simplest way, take all the, which supplement do I take? When do I take it? All this kind of stuff, build muscle.
Yeah.
And then a lot of stuff will kind of come into view, right? But that is the challenge, is filtering. And I love what you're doing here. I mean, we just, this is the truth, right? Fake news sells. We know that. The only way to compete with fake news is pump out a ton of high quality, verifiable information and try to drown out, compete with the noise, maybe, know?
Yeah.
Because the sensationalism is not going away.
Yeah.
If I'm out there trying to hustle and make a buck, I got to make these like really provocative statements, right?
Yeah.
unsubstantiated. But anyway, that's the challenge. We're living in an information age where the consumer has direct access, which I think is so cool. I think it's changing the world. The amount of information we're gleaning from it. CGM, continuous glucose monitors, that's one category that in the next 5 years, we are going to know more about glucose metabolism and the impact on metabolic health than we've understood in the last 5 decades. 5 years, 5 decades. Why? Because we're flooding data into data sets like Levels. If you've heard of Levels, or Signos is another one that they've done a really good job of enrolling. If you're using their glucometer, you're enrolling your data, just data upon data upon data. It's going to change lives at a pace that we've never seen before. So we're living in this world that's like literally at the speed of light or beyond. But at the same time, there are human beings mixed into that mess. And there are some more simple ways to optimize. And then there's the crazy train one-off. And I'll tell you this too. The one thing that always sticks with me is how often people will latch on to the bizarre one-off Joe Rogan posts like methylene blue and sit there and stuff their face with McDonald's.
Yeah.
You're like, all the methylene blue, even if methylene blue had value, it's not going to make up for what you're physically doing, right? You sleep like crap, you eat like crap, and you don't move. I mean, you take supplements for the next 2 centuries, won't make a lick of difference. But people want to like, oh, doc, what should I be taking? It's what you shouldn't be taking. This, you know what I mean? Because people love to latch on, or they'll bring in their new supplement they got from so-and-so. And I'm like, listen, man, if we could put 5 pounds of muscle on, you don't need, realistically. And I'm in the same camp. I mean, yes, I use supplements as indicated. I try to focus on supplement use with quantifiable data, right? If you have a vitamin D level in the 30s, I know you will benefit from being 90 to 100, but I can track the efficacy and the impact of my intervention, right? But you'll notice, especially here in the peptide space, it's just a bunch of stories. And lo and behold, the people telling the best stories are the ones who stand to profit the most. Have you noticed that?
I heard this really weird but kind of hilariously accurate, representation or analogy of this. It's like kind of getting attacked by like a giant swarm of zombies, and you've got one pistol. It's like, hey, what supplement or powder? It's like, no, it's like there's too much going on here. I don't think you're gonna, it's not gonna work that well.
But think about it. That it's a great analogy. And here's the thing: you want to level that pistol up to like a full-blown flamethrower, build muscle. Because you're right. If you've got a couple shots, that's the game right now. Oh, what's your peptide stack, bro? What's your top 3 supplements? Muscle. Creatine. I mean, like, I think that is where, in a sense, it's oversimplified, but in reality, it's the most tried and true mechanism to get from point A to point B. If our central focus is metabolic flexibility, then which is the key, then we have to be lasered in on muscle health and muscle-centric approach to every decision we make. That's more protein in your diet. That's more resistance training. That's better sleep. Oh, look at that. All of a sudden, we've tackled all the major players, right? But that's, I mean, think of it that way. I mean, it's true. I think the evidence supports it. Yes, if you got a pistol and you got 15 shots, and the zombies are coming at you, you're going to lose, plain and simple. But what if you could upgrade that sucker?
That's brilliant. And I think that's such a great way to explain it. And kind of, you've shared so much of this today. And kind of in closing, there's obviously a lot that you really hold true to, some non-negotiables. If you were to have, kind of in closing here, one message to the world and say, look, guys, let's keep it simple. Just try and focus on this one thing. If you were to try and condense that to the world, what would you share with them?
When it comes to longevity, longer, better life, what is truly, unequivocally the single best solution It's muscle health. It's build lean muscle and do it early and do it often. One key concept is the amount of energy, load, physical demand to build muscle is twice that required to maintain. We see that in things like even your protein thresholds, 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of protein to build, 0.5 to 0.6 to maintain. Build it early and maintain it throughout. That's, I mean, whether you call it your, I mean, that's the ticket that everybody's like fountain of youth and all this kind of stuff. Hey, and the beauty of muscle, man, I'll tell you the beauty of muscle. I do think money doesn't buy you muscle. I don't care how rich or poor you are, you still have to get your happy ass up, go to the gym and work. And that's what I love about training, about the discipline required. Because on the one hand, more muscles, no brainer. But getting more muscle, I agree, is not easy. It does take work. It does take discipline. But if you're serious, instead of spending thousands of dollars on supplements, get your creatine, okay? Get your protein, go lift heavy. Pretty cheap approach to longevity, if you ask me.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, that's it in a nutshell, man.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing all this information. It's extremely valuable. We really, really appreciate it.